I'll try to be brief. I'm going to have to be brief at this rate. May we have the slides? So, is happiness the new GDP? Well, I've got to get this clicker to work if I'm going to take us through these slides. Would someone like to give me a hand here? I'm quite happy to talk without slides, but going backwards doesn't seem the ideal. Well, there's my answer, nice brief answer. Shall I just stop now and we'll go and have lunch? I'll give you 6 reasons very quickly, then I'll go through slightly greater length and then I'll stop. Feelings are what matter, and GDP is not a sufficient statistic for feelings. In many nations now we don't have shortages, we probably have too many automobiles, too much food. Sustainability is our problem. As we get richer, money matters less, and we have got richer. We have good ways of measuring feelings these days. My government is doing it in a very detailed way that I'll explain. In humans, I think relative income effects dominate. So if we think about all of those in this room, as the great tide of GDP progress sweeps in, unfortunately I keep comparing myself to my neighbours as they get richer. And finally, we should have listened to a man called Cousins. Human beings have feelings. Anger. You may have encountered it, ladies and gentlemen. This is how many of my students feel when they get their grades back. Boredom. Sadness, and perhaps most important of all, happiness, ladies and gentlemen, cheerfulness. Humans have feelings and feelings matter. We're never going to measure those with GDP. Reason 2. I was a PhD student in economics at Oxford in the 1970s and learned a great deal of mathematical economics. I think it probably did me some good, but I was taught that economics is a social science concerned with the efficient allocation of scarce resources. That was the normal way of thinking about it. We owed it to a man called Lionel Robbins, and that way of thinking, that came essentially from the 1930s, when there really were shortages, there really was hunger. But for many countries of the world, I think that's out of date now, and it's time to think of economics and define it differently. Probably 95% of economists don't agree with me, but I hope you'll make up your own mind. I think it's sensible to view economics as a social science, consider the best way to allocate plentiful resources to maximize happiness and mental health in a society. Third, money matters less as we get richer. In economics, we call that diminishing marginal utility of income. You can think of your happiness as rising in a giant curve that tends to flatten off, and I think all happiness researchers tend to believe such a thing. Now, there's plenty of evidence for that so-called concavity, in other words, that kind of curvature from below. If you look at a hill, the left-hand side is the concave curve. It's going up, but at a flattening rate. Here, the whole literature suffers from an intellectual weakness that I think almost nobody has faced up to, so let me be candid with you. There are actually 2 processes going on inside a person like me when I fill up a happiness survey form. First of all, I'm feeling something, say, as my income rises through time. Maybe I'm having improved feelings. But then I have to decide how am I going to report those feelings on the form to the investigator. So there's not one equation here, there are 2 equations. And I thought it might be a good idea to do quite a lot of mathematics now, but in fact I'm going to skip through most of that. Let me just tell you, if you like calculus, this will be a function of a function rule or a product rule, but I suspect this is not the occasion. So, especially if I can get my clicker to work. There are two bits within me when I fill up a happiness form. There's how I feel, and there's how I report how I feel. There are two functions, not one. Almost no researcher has borne this in mind when talking about the very important concave shape of happiness with respect to income. Researchers have taken this as proof that there's definitely diminishing marginal utility of income, and they may be correct. But in fact, we need to know a lot more about this thing deep inside us that I'm calling the reporting function, and I think we'll go through the mathematics a little more quickly than one might. But here's the bottom line. Even if we find these, and all researchers do, this evidence of a curved relationship between my reported happiness and my reported income, that actually doesn't quite prove that I have diminishing marginal happiness as I get greater earnings. Because the reporting function itself may be curved. And at the University of Warwick in England, or the Americans here may pronounce it Warwick, we're trying to do work to understand what we might think of as the deep reporting function within people, because we will never understand the curvature of happiness equations. In other words, we will never understand real patterns unless we get to the bottom of reporting functions. Reason 4, we're finding lots of measures of happiness. This is the kind of report being produced by my government, and I've been writing about this for 25 or 30 years. I didn't expect to see these things happen in my lifetime, so I've been, I suppose, pleasantly surprised. Now, as part of official government statistics in my country, the government is collecting on hundreds of thousands of people answers to these questions. How satisfied are you with your life? From a scale that runs from 0 up to 10. You might like to think to yourself, ladies and gentlemen, if you get caught in one of these surveys, 0 up to 10, where would you put yourself? Are you an 8? Are you a 3? How happy did you feel yesterday? How anxious, and so on. And one aspect I've been particularly interested in recently is trying to understand, you may be able to see there's a remarkable midlife dip in happiness that we see all over the world and we don't understand. These are government numbers with no adjustment. Today is not the day to go into that, but if you're in your late 40s, you might want to watch out for that dip. It's completely natural. Reason 5, or even reason 4, let's reset these slides. Empirically, there are strong relative effects on utility, and that's just a way of saying that one of the curses of being humans, I suppose there are a few really, as well as some benefits, is that it's very hard for us not to compare what we have with what others get. And if you slide people into MRI scanners, as a very interesting Bonn team in Germany, this is work by Fliesbach and Armin Falk and colleagues in Science and in the Journal of Public Economics. I think of these as two of the most important papers written in quantitative social science and the behavioral sciences in the last quarter of a century. If the researchers in the room don't know these papers, I strongly recommend them. We can look inside the brain. I've seen this lab where there are 2 MRI scanners next to each other. We lie one person down in one, me down in another, and you make me richer. And we study what happens in the other person's brain. And roughly speaking, as I get richer, let's imagine that Edward Diener is in that other scanner. You can see the blood drain away in Ed Diener's brain from the reward centres of his brain. He doesn't like it when Andrew gets a higher professorial income than him, if he does. Again, I think this is not the day for details, but Falk and colleagues showed that the mere fact of outperforming your neighbours, this may be a shock to you, of course, the mere fact of outperforming your neighbours is what makes people have a flow of the oxygenated blood, the bold signal, to the reward areas of their brain. These are the kinds of diagrams that one gets. And just very briefly for researchers, because I was told that this was a talk for researchers, but I suspect you're probably not all statisticians. If you look at the right-hand side of this, ladies and gentlemen, those who care about such things. You could think of this as a kind of measure of happiness. This is an equation read vertically. I like being richer. This comes in positive, 0.3. This is your income. I don't like it when you get richer. That's minus 0.3. Nobody was asked any questions doing this work. This is not subjective well-being data, though we can show the same patterns with surveys. This is telling us, if we take it literally, that within your brain, there's a pure relative effect. The giant GDP growth, maybe at the aggregate level, is bringing us all up. And what's the result? A huge neutralization or washing out of genuine pleasure. Deep down, I would like to be high up the monkey pack, and if you're inclined to look down on me for that, I'm afraid all of you are hoping to be high up the monkey pack as well, we think, when we look at you in a scanner. I'm going to whiz through more of the statistical evidence. One thing we have to ask ourselves in any rich society is that a rational future? If we're all running faster and faster, yet we're comparing ourselves all the time, and inside my brain everything is relative, but the world is going to pot, is that really a sensible future for humankind? And reason 6, my final, in 1934, not that far off, 100 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, a sensible person said, the welfare of a nation can scarcely be inferred from a measure of national income. This was the 1930s. So in everyday English we would say, you can't tell whether a society is happy by measuring its GDP. Was that said by a tree-hugging hippie, ladies and gentlemen? And by the way, this is how I intend to look at the age of 80. If you invite me back. Currently, I can't persuade my wife to wear that dress, however. It was not said by a hippie from the 1930s, it was said by this man. Not a very good impersonator of a hippie in general. And this is a man called Simon Kuznets. Why would I care what Kuznets said about GDP? Because this is the guy, you might say, who invented it. Of course, you can't really invent GDP, but he worked out the kind of giant economic accounting methods for calculating this thing, which is really just the size of an overall economic pie. He got the Nobel Prize for that, and Kuznets said himself, who started the whole blinking thing, the welfare of a nation can scarcely be inferred from a measure of national income. We should have listened to Mr. Kuznets, ladies and gentlemen. Summarising, feelings are what matter. GDP is not a sufficient statistic for feelings. We have probably too much food, too many automobiles. Money matters less as people get richer. We have good ways of measuring feelings. Relative incomes dominate inside humans. So there's an inherent pointlessness, ladies and gentlemen, in pursuing GDP per se when we become rich. And we should have listened to Simon Kuznets. Thank you very much.